Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views we hope are relevant to you. In today's show, Canadian politicians demand to know just how much Modi has interfered in their politics to elect Polievre as leader of the Conservative Party. Also in Canada, we've an interesting update on the story about the museum in Surrey, where an RSS-sponsored exhibition tried to claim Sikhs were Hindus to local outrage. In the United States, the Sikh Coalition lays out its shopping list to the incoming civil rights attorney in Trump's Department of Justice, Harmeet Kaur Dhillon. And here in the UK, the Labour government hastily apologised as its National Health Service used a picture of a Sikh in its latest Stop Smoking campaign. Well, all this and more in today's show. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. In just a couple of more hours, well, I guess about 48, and Santa will be climbing down the chimneys. Don't mistake that big fat man for this one. But for the kids out there and the parents, NORAD, the North American Radar Air Defense System, does have their facilities taken over by the elves every Christmas Eve. So they will be airing exactly where Santa is around the world using the latest radar technology. And you'll be able to follow it on noradsanta.org. So check it out. And yeah, it's always exciting for the kids, Angus, to be able to watch where Santa is and to get themselves tucked into bed before he arrives.
Indeed it will be. And together, James and I, but without Santa, unfortunately, we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as usual, we will be taking a look at loads of great comments, which have been pouring in beneath our videos. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, then, well, let's get things underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
The world is still changing, but some things are staying the same, Angus. Pierre Poilievre is under fire yet once again for the simple fact that people want answers. How much political interference is there with the India government? And this is what one MP has said right in the House of Commons and called out the Conservative Party to start giving some information. They are tired of being held out in the foreign interference investigation and what's going on in regards to India. So let's first take a look. It's Charlie Angus. He's the NDP and member of Parliament for the Timmins James Bay area in Ontario. And he put out on his Facebook page, once again, I tried to get answers from Conservatives about redacted documents stating there was foreign interference in the Conservative leadership race. And why doesn't Pierre Poilievre have national security clearance? What's up there? Needless to say, the Conservative dodged the question. And that's just the normal everyday occurrence when it comes to standing up and answering the questions that Canadians have about the foreign interference within the Conservative Party. We know that there was some interference in the last two leadership races when it comes to the Conservatives, including the one that got Pierre Poilievre into his seat, but we'll get into that in a moment. Right now, we'll just take a look at a very brief video that was in the House of Commons, and it represents Mr. Charlie Angus, the MP, once again calling out Pierre Poilievre on this issue.
The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Very interested in this issue of accountability and sharing documents. We find a June 2024 National Security and Intelligence Committee report that foreign agents for the Chinese and Indian governments interfered with the Conservative leadership race. Those documents are redacted, but I'm sure the Conservatives know a lot more than they've told the Canadian people, and those documents back up the interviews with Aaron O'Toole with lawyers about interference that led to the guy who's living in Stornoway now. So I'm asking my honourable colleague, are the Conservatives willing to share those documents about foreign interference? Because it might explain why the leader of the Conservative Party is unable or unwilling to get national security clearance. What is he trying to hide?
So again, just very plain, very simple, and right to the point. And it is a question that a lot of people have. Now, it should also be noted that a right-wing journalist and media personality by the name of Gaurav Arya, he's a retired major from the Indian Army with a lot of ties to the BJP and others, both active and retired within the Indian military and India government. Now, he is actually calling on the India government to make Pierre Poilievre the $100 million man and potentially a $500 million man if that's what it takes to get him elected in Canada. He is calling on that government to not only interfere, but do it very blatantly by publishing this invitation and this insistence, not only to the India government, but to his followers. Now, it's really interesting to take a look here that he is looking to, as I said, put that money forward. And in one point, he actually says that the war chest should be used to place ads in newspapers and fund Canadian think tanks. He also adds that because he believes China interfered in India's 2024 election, that India should therefore interfere in Canadian elections. So I don't understand why he figures China's interference means that they have to interfere here. He goes on to say that what I want to know is why India isn't sending money to Canada. If $100 million isn't enough, then give $500 million. He went on to continue saying that what's that much money? We give that to poor nations. You should give money to the Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre should have so much money his hands will get tired of spending it. He'll say, you guys gave me so much money, what do I do with it? I'll go crazy. This is how much money he should have, is what he continued stating. Now, as I said, Arya's YouTube channel has a following of 2.6 million plus people. He has an additional 1.6 million followers on Twitter. This post alone has seen approximately 1 million views. Now, if you don't think that that is interfering in the Canadian politics, partner him up with the likes of Elon Musk, and we'll see how far that goes, because we know that Elon Musk also wants Trudeau out of office. But the real point here is the interference. Whether you like Trudeau, whether you like Jagmeet Singh, the level of interference by the India government that is in cahoots with the Conservative Party should be very aggressively investigated and monitored at this point. Now, Arya also has ties to various Canadian media figures, including a retired CBC journalist, Terry Milowski, who published controversial reports about the Sikh people and about the Khalistan movement and many other issues that were quite controversial. As I said, he has now retired, but once more, Arya says India must support Pierre, Conservatives to win at any cost. And it goes on. This whole article goes on. It's a few months old, but it really shows where we're at with the continued demands that we get to the bottom of the foreign interference in that Conservative Party, within the members of Parliament, and within every party. But predominantly, it seems that the smoking gun is aimed right at the Conservative Party, and they need to take responsibility, take accountability, and get the facts out to the Canadian citizens before the next election. Many people are basing their choices for the next election based on social media and other posts, and a lot of that propaganda is stemming from the Indian and Chinese governments, and a lot of Canadians are not tech savvy enough to realize that they are being played. When you look at Pierre Poilievre right now, he's way up in the lead of the polls with approximately twice as many supporters as the next party. So it's very important that Canadians as a whole understand the depths of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's play here in Canada, that essentially, in my opinion, he is, Pierre Poilievre is like Pinocchio, and Geppetto is, of course, Narendra Modi pulling the little puppet strings there. So very, very concerning when it comes to Canadian politics and the next election that could be coming sooner than later, with the current calls for another non-confidence vote against Justin Trudeau in the new year.
Yeah, I think there's positive and negatives to take from this. I think the positives is, first of all, this Indian interference is actually hitting the mainstream. This isn't just a fringe sort of accusation. This isn't just something being talked about within the Sikh community. It's actually now being, it's been questions are being raised in the Canadian Parliament by mainstream politicians. Again, the mainstream media is covering it. So this whole story about India interfering in Canadian politics is a big story. So people are taking it seriously. That in itself is a huge victory. That means that, again, it's not just the complaints, which we call it the minor complaints of the Sikh community trying to raise this issue, trying to get people to take them seriously. It's actually being discussed in Parliament by mainstream politicians, and the media are covering it. So that in itself is a big victory. That means the whole topic is being taken very seriously, which implies, therefore, that it's real. This isn't just made up by an oppressed minority. It's actually, it must be really happening.
Right.
If even people from outside the community are now raising these questions, which in itself, as I say, is a very good thing. Now, the bad thing, Major Arya, he's been the subject of our channel for quite some time. I've certainly covered various stories about him. I would say he is the Indian equivalent of our own Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon. He's got a very well followed YouTube channel, millions of followers. He's absolutely right wing. He is the right wing firebrand, and we mustn't forget he's a very dangerous and divisive figure. He really is the rallying call for the extremists on the right wing of India. The right wing Hindutva extremists really follow him like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, for those who are familiar with that story. And he leads and others follows. And of course, he was guilty last year of demanding that the American criminals, that the mafia should get involved in targeting Sikhs and Khalistanis. He actually said this on his YouTube channel. He said that India should pay money to the US mafia to go out and to go into the homes of American Sikhs and kill them and beat them up. That was actually what he said on his channel. I mean, this is the sort of guy that we're dealing with. So in other words, firstly, you can't take his political views seriously because the guy is an extremist, is an idiot, he's dangerous. He's actually encouraging people to cause violence to ordinary innocent people. So again, his word really should not be respected. But secondly, he is a dangerous and divisive figure because a lot of people follow him and a lot of people listen to him. And even he is saying, we should donate money to the conservative right wing in Canada. Now, as you rightly say, James, if that isn't interference, I don't know what is. I mean, that is about as blatant as it gets. Because if 1-point-something million Indians are following this and they all start donating money to the Conservative Party in Canada, that's an awful lot of money. And again, that buys an awful lot of influence, which means that the Conservative Party in Canada are certainly not going to turn that away, are they? Because it's money, it's resources to fight this next incoming election. I think the worry is, James, here that clearly it's likely, I guess, that the Conservatives are going to win this next election. What does that bring? What legacy does that bring? What interference and influence does that bring from India? I find that very concerning, James.
Absolutely, Angus, but that's one problem I'd like to have is to see how tired my hands can get spending $500 million. So let's move on there, Angus. We have a follow-up to a story that you reported on last week, and that was in relation to my local community, Surrey, British Columbia. Now, there was a museum showcase that was on display in the exhibit that was at the Surrey Museum. It was called A Glimpse into the Hindu Civilization, Darshana. And this was triggering a lot of outcry by the Sikh community and the World Sikh Organization because the display in itself and the message that it was sending. They were classifying all Sikhs as Hindus. They were classifying the Sikh religion as just a part of the Hindu religion. And this is, of course, as you reported, Angus, very far from the truth and absolutely no truth to it whatsoever. Now, of course, this display has been in Washington. This exhibit has been in California. It's been in many cities. So I really encourage our viewers to watch and see if it shows up in your community and demand that this misinformation not be posted and shared within public spaces. Now, the exhibition is organized by the the HSS, and that's a branch of the extremist, and I'm not even going to bother trying to say it because I'll mess it up, but the RSS network. Now, they have a well-documented history of targeting minority communities in India, including the Sikhs, the Muslims, the Christians, Dalits, and the RSS promotes an exclusionary and supremacist Hindutva ideology that seeks to raise India's diverse religious and cultural minorities to establish a Hindu Rashtra. Now, this should also be noted that the individual who is leading this display in this exhibit is somebody by the name of Gola Walker, and he's praised Nazi Germany, stating Germany has also shown how well nigh impossible it is for races and cultures having differences going to the root to be assimilated into one united whole. Now, very, very racist and very rude and really divisive words that really instill violence, anger, and hatred towards people instead of bringing people together. And this really is underscoring the extremist ideology at the heart of that organization. Now, the RSS has affiliates, and one of those is recognized as the HSS, and that's why many people are calling for Canada to recognize the RSS as a terrorist organization, or at least a banned organization in Canada. Now, with that said, a lot of people were very angered and upset by that display and by that exhibit. Now, the mayor of Surrey received the information, received a complaint, and really took it seriously. Now, Brenda Locke is a mayor in a very growing city. Surrey is one of the quickest growing cities in the country. And when she looks at the community, she does see it as a whole. She wants to make sure that it is an inclusive and open environment for all religious, all ethnicities, all backgrounds, all lifestyles, and she does a fairly good job. Now, I don't agree with all of her politics, but I do have a lot of respect for her in terms of standing up for the local community. And with that said, once she was made aware of the controversy surrounding this exhibit at the Surrey Museum, she had the museum immediately remove the exhibit in its entirety from the museum. She does not believe in any way, shape, or form that it should be a place that can instill such hatred or misinformation. And kudos to her for acting promptly to make sure that it was shut down early and taken out. Now, the BC president of the World Sikh Organization said that the exhibit falsely claims that Sikhs are Hindus and that Sikhi is merely a branch of Hinduism. So, of course, the World Sikh Organization is very happy to see that it was removed. They are still questioning the process and how this display got on to the agenda for the Surrey Museum. Now, unfortunately, not everybody understands the complex history and the differences between different cultures, religions, and sectors of the world. So again, it seems to be an honest mistake that was made by those vetting the displays. They receive applications every year for countless exhibits to enter into this limited space at the Surrey Museum. Of course, this made the list, but again, it will bring a lot of change in terms of how they vet the future exhibits coming into the museum. And once again, I think that it was very brave and very leadership worthy of the local government to remove that and to have that exhibit removed early and shut down. And I hope that our viewers will keep an eye on it. Again, it's a traveling exhibit that's been traveling North America, so I really encourage you to keep an eye on if it comes to your town and make sure that any municipality or provincial, state government deals with it accordingly, Angus.
Yes, I think it's good news, obviously, that people have listened and taken into account the sensitivities of the community. And because it's an ongoing battle that we report on almost a daily basis, the RSS-driven agenda, they are doing everything they can to try and suppress and persecute the community, the Sikh community. Essentially, as we keep saying, is because they fear it. They are terrified because it stands up as the only real existential threat to its control of India and its control of the Indian population. So they're doing everything they can to stamp out Sikhi wherever they can find it, stamp out the community, and particularly undermine its cultural heritage, undermine what it stands for. And of course, they do it through a very much multilateral approach. They will attack it from every angle they can possibly find. Of course, they have an enormous financial resource to do this, and they do this through all these organisations, particularly throughout North America, that we've reported on regularly. These organisations that are fronted essentially as pro-Hindu organisations. In reality, they are pro-RSS organisations, and again, they exist to try and undermine the cultural identity of the Sikh community. And of course, one of their key tactics in this is to try and label Sikhs as Hindus, which of course they're not, which we talk about on a regular basis till we're blue in the face and explain why Sikhs are most definitely not Hindus. Yet they try and perpetuate this myth because they see it as a very easy way to try and dilute what Sikhs are, try and essentially assimilate them into the Hindu community and therefore essentially just hide them, to make them disappear, make them invisible. So that's the tactic behind this. So the only way to counter this is wherever this appears, wherever this agenda appears and this tactic appears, is that it must be met with absolute brute force. I use that metaphorically, as in it must be met with a huge community drive to highlight and publicise what the reality is, that Sikhs are not Hindus, and that everybody in government, local government, etc., must be made aware of this. Again, it's all about education, and any place, any museum or any cultural location that displays any material like this must be made immediately aware, ideally before it even gets exhibited. Is that as soon as anybody finds material like this, it is stamped on immediately, that the community gets together, approaches, obviously in a very amicable, peaceful way, but approaches the museum or the cultural organisation that's displaying it and say that, please, this is deeply offensive, it is deeply untrue. Just explain why in a nice, peaceful, amicable way, and politely request that it is removed. And as has been demonstrated here, James, I think very encouraging to see this, is that the authorities have recognised it for what it is. It's just pure RSS propaganda, and they have acted accordingly. So as you rightly say, James, I think if the community across Canada and across North America, if you ever see anything like this, immediately get your local community together and immediately approach the location and politely request that it is removed and explain why. So, James, as I say, this is an ongoing battle as part of this enormous war, this propaganda war. And I think this must be stamped down upon immediately anytime it surfaces its ugly head.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, the Hindufa extremists are really trying to push the narratives that really divide and separate. But it should also, as we so often state, that it's not the representative of the Hindu culture or the Hindu population as a whole. They are, the majority are standing there shaking their head as well, stating that it is bringing divisiveness, it is inciting anger, it is inciting issues that we've seen, such as at the temple last month in Brampton, Ontario, or in Surrey, British Columbia. So again, it is doing damage to both the Hindu and the Sikh community, and it's not something that has a place in Canada.
Indeed. So, as I say, great news that it has been removed thanks to the local community. So well done in Surrey. Right, James, let's move on south of your border now. Let's move to the United States and the Sikh Coalition, who've been extremely active. Promoting the Sikh message and ensuring that the government, the US government and all the different layers of government are educated and made aware of everything and all the issues that affect the Sikh community. So they've been a wonderful organisation ensuring that Sikh issues are addressed at all levels of government. Now, we are at a time of enormous opportunity in the United States for the Sikh community because, of course, we have the incoming Trump administration. And as part of that new administration, as we announced last week, he has appointed Harmeet Kaur Dhillon as his new assistant attorney for civil rights as part of the as part of the existing Department of Justice. So he has appointed this very high-profile Sikh lawyer, a very high-achieving lady. She's done an awful lot for the Sikh community. She's done a huge amount for human rights, not just in the Sikh community, and she has done. She was actually. She presented to the Republican Congress convention earlier this year before the election, and she read out the Ardas, the prayer at the start of that convention. So again, she's had a very high profile and has been effectively rewarded for her good work and her service, her selfless service, her saver to the United States, all communities in fact of the US, by being appointed the Assistant Attorney for Civil Rights. Now, as part of that process, the Sikh Coalition, who obviously will have an established relationship with Ms Dillon for her past work, they have written a public letter to her setting out what I call their shopping list of issues that they would like her to take under her wing, to address in her new role, and to help promote and push forward all sorts of layers of legislation and rights and things like that to preserve and protect the community going forward. And of course, this is very relevant to all Sikh communities across the diaspora, because where the US goes, other communities, or sorry, other governments tend to follow. I say that slightly hesitatingly with the British government, but certainly they will take note of where the Trump government, the US government, leads in terms of looking after its Sikh community, because it will probably follow in to some extent in the same direction. So this letter, it's a very long letter, it's a very detailed letter, and it does cover a lot of very, I would say, very in-depth, detailed, and frankly very dry subject matter. So we won't go into too much detail with it. But what I will do, I'll just pick out some of the key issues, some of which will be very familiar to our regular audience, some of which won't be. So I'll just go through this. It starts off, Dear Ms Dillon, we write to you today from the Sikh Coalition on the occasion of your historic nomination for the position of Assistant Attorney General. And this really is historic. It's a huge achievement for the community. And it really is a big step forward in terms of political voice for the community. It's our view that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, the DOJ CRT, is an absolutely critical institution for defending and expanding the rights of not just our community, but other minority groups across the US. Of course, she is there to represent all communities, not just the Sikh community. Beyond your considerable professional experience and expertise, we are hopeful that the perspective that you can bring to DOJ CRT's work as a Sikh American woman will ultimately serve Sarbat Dabala for the good of all, in keeping with the Sikh faith tradition. Now, long-standing concerns exist to our organisation and the Sikh community as a whole, and in many cases significantly relevant to other communities. Of course, very typical of the Sikh community, they represent all minority communities. They always stand up for injustice wherever it exists, not just against their own community. And again, that is why they serve as such a deep threat to the Modi government and the RSS. So, okay, the main headings. The first one, opposing workplace discrimination. This is a big one, and this actually, we've talked a lot about many of the elements within this. It's cropped up in many stories that we've covered. And they say, as you well know, that from your own extensive professional experience, workplace discrimination remains a serious challenge for Sikhs in a wide variety of career fields. Though many issues of workplace discrimination must be addressed through litigation, we believe that the department does have the opportunity to take some positive steps forward. Now, they refer here to continue the Department of Justice involvement in ongoing discrimination matter against the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And we have actually covered that story specifically, their most recent failure to accommodate bearded peace officers. Yeah, this is a story, James, that we have touched upon on a fairly regular basis. This is, of course, bearded Sikh men with with facial hair. How on earth do they wear respirators and PPE, personal protection equipment? And we've had lots of discussions, and our audience have got involved in this on a regular basis. So again, this is raising that very same issue here as part of legislation, and the coalition is asking Ms Dillon to, of course, address this and put into place legislation that protects in the workplace bearded Sikhs, so that they essentially their jobs are not at risk because they happen to have a beard. To continue robust enforcement of Title VII with respect to state and local government employers. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, what is it? It prohibits employment discrimination based on race, colour, religion, sex and national origin. For those who may not be aware of that, I was not, and that is what it is. And so again, ask you to take a close look at that, particularly with respect to prioritising personal protective equipment, PPE, as we've just discussed. To create and disseminate a rule or guidance on religious accommodations in drug testing. Now here's an interesting one, James. As you are no doubt aware, Sikhs who maintain their unshorn hair as an article of faith have encountered challenges with hair-based drug testing. Now, of course, this never occurred to myself. Drug tests in the workplace when they occur, and this is I've encountered this on a regular basis when I used to work in the oil industry, for example, is that drug tests quite often take samples of hair. That's how they do it. And of course, if you are a Sikh and you're a turban Sikh, you can't remove your hair. You can't get your hair out because, of course, you've got your turban, your dastar on. So, of course, it does, of course, create problems in drug testing situations. And, of course, if you don't provide a sample, you could potentially lose your job. So this is all about saying, look, there are alternative ways of drug testing, and the coalition are saying, look, you've got to Ms. Dillon, you've got to acknowledge this fact and provide legally. You've got to provide alternatives to hair samples for workplace drug testing. Create and disseminate trainings, rules and guidance on religious harassment in the workplace. So the department should develop trainings, rules and guidance in consultation with stakeholders to combat this issue with the goal of ensuring that no one is forced to choose between their faith and their career, that individuals of all faiths, or no faith indeed, are not subjected to discriminatory treatment while simply trying to earn a living. It's a pretty basic thing, but of course that does crop up on a regular basis, sadly, in the workplace, not just in the US, but of course across the whole diaspora. Then we move on to hate crimes. Now, again, this is a very big area, not just the workplace now, this is in general society, hate crimes. And we've touched on this regularly. So the letter asks to advocate for a mandate for universal hate crime reporting from law enforcement organisations to the FBI. So, of course, this comes back to some very basic steps that need to be in place. If you can't report a hate crime, and first of all, if you can't even identify what a hate crime is, then it can never be addressed. You can only legally address hate crimes if firstly, you know exactly what a hate crime is, and secondly, that there is an infrastructure in place to report such a hate crime, and thirdly, that infrastructure collects that data to summarise it so then policies can be installed to combat it. So it needs that whole infrastructure of identifying, reporting and then acting on it before anything obviously can be done about it. So again, they're highlighting this fact to Ms. Dillon. Increased federal hate crime enforcement for a complete range of targeted communities in instances of state-level inaction. So again, it builds on that same story. Ensure proper implementation of the Jabara Haya No Hate Act provisions of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. What is that? The Jabara Haya No Hate Act is a bill that creates grants for state and local governments to combat hate crimes. It also authorises additional penalties for hate crime offences. So, essentially, what it does, that bill, it was actually the first federal hate crimes legislation in over 12 years. What it does, it puts in place the ability for the government to allocate grants, money, essentially, and resources to state and local governments to combat hate crime and to build that infrastructure that I've just talked about so that hate crimes can be addressed and dealt with, reported and dealt with. To continue to prioritise efforts to combat violent white supremacist extremists. Wow, that's a pretty scary one. So, of course, the white supremacist extremists, that's quite a mouthful, WSE for short. So it's asking policies to be put in place to keep an eye on these neo-Nazis that sadly exist in the United States. They are a minority of right-wing extremist Nazis that exist on that far right wing. Preventing bias-based bullying in schools. Now, this is another big area that, again, we've covered on a regular basis. And this is all about education and getting that education about Sikhi, and not just Sikhi, but other minorities as well, into schools, into the educational layer of society, so that the young generations can learn and understand what the Sikh community is all about, what it represents. So as they grow into adults, they take that education with them and they become better, more educated, more rounded, more tolerant adults as they grow up. So they say create a comprehensive Dear Colleague letter dedicated to religion-based discrimination in schools under Title IV of the Civil Rights Act. Now, I did look up Title IV. It was all a bit long and complicated, and again, I won't go into detail about it, but essentially it sits under that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, again, which is all about trying to ensure that discrimination based on race, colour, religion, sex, etc. is built into the education system, so that the youngsters grow up and understand that discrimination basically is bad, in a simple summary. And they want to work with, or they're asking Ms. Dillon to work with the Department of Education to establish public school policy guidance on religious accommodations. Now, the WAYRF found a statistically significant connection between schools whose classroom materials and policies were not inclusive of Sikhi and an increased rate of bias-based bullying. So a direct correlation. If you don't educate youngsters, they grow up into more adults who are more likely to be biased and discriminatory. So one policy area where the department could provide guidance to public schools is regarding the accommodation of religious needs, specifically worn articles of faith, including Sikh dastars and patkars. So again, I would refer back to a story that we covered last week, which is where Alabama became the 20th the 20th state in the US to include Sikhi on their curriculum, in their curriculum at school. So again, the youngsters are being taught, and there is this policy, this plan to roll this out, hopefully in the foreseeable future, to all 52 states of the United States. That again falls into this. And then additional areas of concern and recommendations. Again, lots of these goes into all sorts of detail. These are very much, I would call them as administrative, mainly the very sort of arcane, very, very dry sort of areas. But again, nonetheless, extremely important. Stand up for the rights of immigrants, naturalised citizens and others. And again, there's a whole list of areas that they're asking Ms. Dillon to address there. Now, again, an important one here, end discrimination against Sikhs by the TSA, that is the Transportation Security Administration. These are the people who police ports, airports, things like that. We've covered stories here, James, of examples where kirpans, Sikhs who've been wearing kirpans, have been held by TSA agents, asked to remove their kirpans, or indeed even asked to remove their dastars. Again, it's all about educating the TSA and the employees of the TSA what these articles of faith mean, and that they mustn't be asked to remove them, etc. So a big area, and an area that's caused all sorts of controversies. To affirm and preserve the right to protest, this is a really important one here. So, as they say, as you're well aware, the Sikh faith tradition has a long and proud history of standing against injustices, from armed resistance in the days of the Gurus through the historic scale of peaceful demonstrations by Indian farmers in 2021. And this tradition runs in lockstep with the central nature of the rights to free speech and protest in the American story and democratic experiment. This is an enormous one. I think this, in my personal opinion, is the most important one of all this list, because it is absolutely imperative that our right to free speech, our right to protest, our right to take to the streets, hold our governments accountable, is written into the United States Constitution. But this is why it affects all of us around the diaspora. This, in any democracy, is one of the most fundamental principles of our freedom of speech. It allows us to stand up anywhere in our society and hold our government to account. It's our ability to protest, it's our ability to offend, not illegally, but our ability to offend political opponents, our ability to offend people that we actually don't agree with, as long as it stays within the law. But that is a fundamental right of free speech. That is what the extremists are trying to stop. That is what the right-wing and the left-wing extremists, who sit on both sides of the political spectrum, but at those extreme ends, they are trying to silence. They are trying to influence our politicians and our policies. They're trying to influence our governments to silence us because we stand in the middle, us normal folk who stand up for human rights, the rule of law and democracy. We stand up as an existential threat to their dominance, to their control. They are trying to silence the Sikh community. They are trying to silence all communities, all minority communities. They are even trying to silence the normal law-abiding people who sit in the middle of all these extremists. We are just the ordinary folk who live in normal democracies. We have a right to stand up and air our opinions. We have a right to air our political views, whether you agree them with or not. And these extremists, whether it's Modi's right-wing RSS extremists, whether it's the left-wing extremists here in the UK, whoever it is, they are trying to silence and cancel the right to stand up and speak openly and protest. And that is why this, in my personal opinion, is one of the most important in the Sikh Coalition's letter, because it doesn't just represent the Sikh community and the minority communities in the United States. It stands up for all of us right across the democratic West. In fact, believe it or not, it stands up for those people in India. Yes, the people in India who want that right to protest, who want that right to take to the Indian streets to protest against the Modi government, whether it is the farmers' protest or whether it is the Hindus who want to protest about something that they don't agree with. That is the right that is fundamental in every democracy and must never be lost. That is what the Sikh community is standing up for. They are fighting for that, and all of us must join them in that fight. So that was a slight tangent. Let me move on to the final parts of this letter. Maintain the demands of justice's jurisdiction over voting rights. And again, this is an important one. Groups throughout civil society, including the Sikh Coalition, were gravely concerned by many of the proposals of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, which included the call to reassign responsibility for prosecuting election-related offences from the civil rights to criminal division. And a lot of these policies prevent certain communities from voting. So again, this is all about, and this goes back to what I've just been talking about, this is all about manipulating and changing the democratic process so that it tries to exclude people who stand up to injustice, who stand up to these extremists. It's trying to restrict people from voting or their ability to vote. And it's trying to minimise the voice of minorities, etc., because they feel that this voice is affecting their extremist views. So democracy means that everybody in a democracy has an equal voice. All of us, whatever community you're from, we all have an equal voice that must be heard as part of that democratic process. And there are movements trying to restrict that, trying to control that, and trying to damage that basic human right that exists within democracy. So again, it's a very, very important fundamental one, this. So that basically is it. There's an awful lot in there. As a final note, they say, as you may well know, the Sikh community is anything but a political or cultural monolith. Some Sikhs are conservatives, some are liberal, and many more fall somewhere in between or defy categorisation entirely. The Sikh Coalition does not take a political position in the framework of partisan politics. This is, again, is an important final point they're making here, is that we're not representing, I can't even say that word, representing conservatives. We are representing all people from across the political spectrum. This is all about basic human rights. This is all about basic democratic rights, the rule of law, things that we should take for granted but are under threat. They're under threat from all directions, not least from India, James. But these are things that we must all fight for because they are fundamental to the proper workings of a democratic society.
Absolutely, and right at the tail end of that, of course, they bring up that it is about human rights. It's about respect of all religious beliefs, all lifestyle beliefs, all genders, and so forth. And that's what it's all about. It's about respecting everyone as human and to afford them the rights that they have under the protections of whether it's in the U.S. under the Constitution, in Canada under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and so forth. So again, they are there to represent everyone. As we always see with the Sikhs, Angus, they're always there to watch out for themselves, but also to watch out for everyone else. And that's what makes it such an inclusive religion and just such an inclusive people.
Indeed, and this is why when we get critical comments about Khalistan and saying, oh, Khalistan will be this dreadful theocracy and nobody will be welcome there apart from Sikhs, absolutely not. I mean, this letter summarises really why Khalistan will be an enormous success, because it treats everybody. It stands up, as I said, for the basic fundamental tenets of democracy, the rule of law. That is what Khalistan will stand for. And again, it's based on everybody. No matter your background, your creed, your religion, your ethnicity, everybody is seen as equal. That is the fundamental point of Sikhi, and that is why Khalistan will stand as a beacon that will attract, I think, people from all over the world. So, James, let us move on from that to my second story. And this is just a fun. I mean, I laugh because it's a bit of what we call a storm in a teacup. But it comes back to this educational element that we talk about on a regular basis. And this actually hit mainstream media here in the UK. And when I first read it, I started sort of laughing, thinking, God, this is just. Again, it demonstrates how clumsy governments and government organisations can be if they are not better educated about their minorities that they are supposed to service. And here in the UK, an advert hit, it was broadcast right across the media, right across social media. It was an advert by our National Health Service, the NHS. And it was a well-meaning policy. It was a well-meaning thing. It was designed to stop smoking. Smoking, I abhor smoking, and it's a dreadful thing. And I have at least 2 family members who died horrible deaths because of smoking. So it's something I personally feel very passionate about. Smoking is an awful thing. And of course, smoking is banned in Sikhi. Smoking falls part of the things that I think it was the first guru said, and I'll be corrected, I'm sure by members of our audience. But certainly it was banned very early on in the establishment of the Sikh religion, because all drugs, whether it's alcohol, drugs as we normally know them, or tobacco, they all affect the brain and stop you seeing the purity and goodness of God, I think is the principle behind it. So that is the religious basis, the religious foundation behind the fact that Sikhs are not supposed to smoke. Tobacco is banned within Sikhi. So when this advert appeared, would you believe this advert featured a Sikh? The advert read, "Make 2025 the year you quit smoking. Search better health, quit smoking." So this was the advert showing a Sikh standing there, implying that this Sikh has just quit smoking. Now, of course, the Sikh community, when they saw this, they were up in arms. There was outrage, saying, hang on a second, this is so deeply offensive to the Sikh community. And of course, the Sikh Federation were on this straight away, and they contacted the government here in the UK, and they said, in fact, their press release said, when we realised the photograph of the turban-wearing Sikh it turned out it was a stock photograph. That meant that the NHS marketing team, when they put this poster together, they just went onto their stock photograph library and said, okay, let's just get somebody from one of our minorities, because they tend to obviously always put pictures of minority people just to be inclusive. And they said, oh, a Sikh, that'll do. Yes, that's a good one. But of course, these people in the marketing department did not realise what it meant putting a Sikh face in there. They had no idea. Again, it comes back to education. They had not been educated what tobacco means to the Sikh community. So they just picked a random, as they said. It was provided by Alamy, which is one of the stock media companies online. And so the Sikh Federation, when they saw this, and they saw it was actually a stock photo provided by Alamy, they went straight to Wes Streeting. Now, Wes Streeting is a Labour politician. He is the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. He is the Labour government politician responsible for the National Health Service. And the Sikh Federation pointed out that the use of the photograph of a turban-wearing Sikh in a quit-smoking campaign was deeply offensive. Others, including Gurdwaras and some MPs, also contacted Wes Streeting. Because, of course, we have 12 Sikh MPs, and, of course, I'm sure they noticed it straight away as well. Now, to the government's credit, within hours, Wes Streeting had the photograph removed and sent the following message to Devinderjit Singh, who's the principal advisor of the Sikh Federation. And he said, "Dear Dabinderjit, this was an image for a public health campaign that was put on the campaign website and then used by the NHS. As soon as I saw it, I understood how inappropriate it was. Well done, Wes Streeting. It's now been removed. We have asked all partners not to use the image. I've asked the team to follow up to ensure everyone understands the ask and why this image will have been offensive to Sikhs. Again, it's education. I've also asked for a note setting out how this could have happened to ensure we put steps in place across the board to make sure similar mistakes aren't repeated. Lessons have been learned." That dreadful phrase, lessons are never learned, because we keep hearing this phrase, lessons have been learnt. We will see, time will tell. Thanks for raising this. Sorry that we've had to do it. Please feel free to send this message to your networks with my best wishes and apologies. Dabinderjit Singh responded, "Wes realised straight away the image of the turban wearing Sikh in the campaign was inappropriate and offensive. Sikhs are strictly forbidden to smoke. It was therefore a major mistake to show a turban wearing a Sikh in the campaign. The Sikh himself will be livid. His photograph was used." Wes has not only had the image removed, is asked how the mistake was made and to learn lessons so similar mistakes are not repeated. Having MPs like Wes in senior positions in the UK government who understand the Sikh community and our issues is a massive asset for the government. Wes is a genuine friend of the Sikh community, and we will be meeting him and a number of ministers in the new year to take stock on specific issues concerning the Sikh community where Labour made promises but progress has been mixed. Now this is an important response, because this actually moves away from this, I would say, this storm in a teacup story. It was a silly mistake that was made. It does highlight the importance of education, etc., etc. But what this does mean, I think this is an important part to take from this exchange of letters between Dabinderjit and Wes, is that actually the Sikh community now does have more important, more powerful voices in the Labour government. That people, and Wes himself obviously is not a Sikh, but he is recognising instantly issues that are affecting the Sikh community. So again, this proves how important it is that the community at grassroots level keep pushing upwards, because the community's voice is now being heard. It is being heard at very high levels of government. So it's not just, I would say, relatively small issues like this smoking mistake, but it means the bigger issues like 1984, the bigger issues like transnational oppression. These are the issues that really matter, because they are literally affecting people's lives now. And it means that people higher up in the Labour government are taking note of the Sikh community's issues. It also means that this drive for recognition of the genocide, the 1984 genocide, the push, the drive for this promise that the Labour government for an investigation, a judge-led inquiry into the British government involvement in the attack on the Golden Temple, the Harmandir Sahib in 1984. At the moment, there's no talk about that, but they did promise when they were in opposition that they would launch this inquiry. So again, it means that the Sikh issues are being taken note at a higher level, which means that more pressure will be on Keir Starmer himself to launch these things that he promised prior to his election. And also the story of Jagtar Singh Johal, that the big issues like Jaggi, again, are raised with Keir Starmer himself, because the voices are now higher up that hierarchy. They're higher up the strata, those tiers of government. It means that the community has friends in high places, which means that it's more likely that issues like Jaggi, like 1984, like the genocide, they will be raised and actions and results will be heard. We keep our fingers crossed, James, that the community will have positive steps forward in the future here in the UK.
Absolutely, Angus, and it just goes to show between this story and then the one about the Surrey Museum is that when people are peaceful, when they use their words, send a letter just explaining the issues in a diplomatic way, how effective that pen can be to resolve those issues instead of, major protests and screaming. They take a peaceful route first and just bring it and use it as an educational opportunity. And that really seems to be that where the Sikh movement is really having success, Angus, and the Khalistan movement is about peaceful protest, about peaceful awareness and peaceful education of the general public. I think that is going to be the key, and it's going to be celebrated when you and I have lunch in Khalistan.
I look forward to that day, James. Indeed, it's all about getting the Khalistan movement out in the public eye so people ask positive questions. What is it? What does it stand for? and then the whole infrastructure is in place to roll out that education. This is what it stands for. This is why it's good for you, why it's good for the world, etc., etc. So on that positive note, let us move on to our comment section. Loads of comments came pouring in indeed last week. So thank you to our wonderful audience from all parts of the world who contributed so massively in our comments columns. There have been some really, really interesting threads, really interesting discussions going on. Now, one thread was started by one of our regular commenters, Ashley Kandar. And I put this up, and I've just taken just a couple of responses on this thread because it was quite a long one. It was quite an interesting, detailed thread. And Ashley started it by saying, agree with your wealth distribution comments. We started talking about this is in response to my editorial, and I talked a lot about the caste. Caste system and how evil it is, and how it's really undermined and crippled the growth and the potential of India as a nation. Caste discrimination is illegal in India. It is actually, and it is actually even written into the constitution. It's sort of, and I use that sort of. Watch my podcast with Colonel Singh, where we analysed the constitution line by line, and it's very cleverly written. Actually, the caste system, the wording is very devious. Technically, it appears on the face of it that the caste system is illegal in the Constitution. In fact, it's not. It's a little bit more subtle than that. But anyway, I won't digress that. But yes, caste discrimination, it has actually been put into legislation in India that caste system is illegal. Most caste discrimination is conducted by Sikhs, particularly Jat Sikhs. Now, Gurmit Singh responded, and this is where we start getting into, I would say, the complex politics of the Sikh community itself. Now, Gurmit Singh says Sikhs don't believe in the caste system like Hindus do. Being Jat or Ramgahi is not the same as being a Brahmin and the untouchable or a Dalit. This is reality of Hindutva, an Indian fell state. And then Ashley comes back with his response, and there were a lot of comments in between these. So apologies, I've had to cut these out in terms of there were just so many. But Ashley responds finally by saying, you mean Jat Sikhs? I personally have no problem with Jat Sikhs, but I'm saying that this caste nonsense exists everywhere in India. I don't agree with your comments about protection of Punjab. They've done a lot of damage, in my opinion, not just to Punjab, but to reputation of Sikhs. Now, I put this thread in mainly because there is a lot here about as I talked about, the complex issue of the internal Sikh community and the talk about Jat Sikhs and the different layers, or call it layers, of the Sikh community. I've deliberately not, in any of our shows, gone into this, and I'll put this up just almost to highlight this point. I do not understand, and James, I'm sure, does not understand the inner complexities of Sikh politics, and we don't want to get involved in that because, firstly, we're not Sikhs. We don't live in the community, which means we don't really understand the nuances, the subtleties, and the complexities of it. And I don't even want to go there, primarily because it would probably take me a lifetime of living in the community to understand really what it's all about and what it means, and as I say, the nuances of it. But what I would say, and the main reason I put this up, is because to control the community is to divide the community. All communities in any society has layers, it has its own divisions, it has its own strata, it has almost its own class distinctions. It's human nature. Here in the UK we have a class system. It's definitely not the caste system, but we have a class system. It exists, but life goes on and we just deal with it. But again, it's human nature. Humans will always organise themselves into different classes of whatever, depending on certain criteria, whatever those criteria mean. It is not the caste system. The caste system is a very deeply embedded, historically embedded, evil system that really does divide society. It is very different to other more subtle class systems, let's call it. So let me just finalise this comment by saying, please, as a community, don't turn on each other. Do not be divided. Don't let the outsiders, and of course by that I'm particularly referring to the RSS and Hindutva, don't let them divide the community down these sorts of guidelines. I'm speaking deliberately not getting involved in these divisions in the Sikh community because, again, I think it is better. I will leave that to the community itself to deal with on your own, amongst yourselves. But what I would say is just an overriding message from certainly somebody outside the community is saying, do not let outsiders use this to drive wedges within your own community, James. Don't give them a weapon to divide the Sikh community, whatever this all means, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And that's a big message that we always send out. And that is not to be dragged into the divisive rhetoric that's out there trying to divide communities, but also trying to shine them in a negative light when one little issue happens for one person out of a million. You know that's where the spotlight is going to shine. So instead of having a spotlight shine on you, be a leader and a shining star.
Indeed. I'll just finish that one off by saying, united we stand, divided we fall. Don't let them divide the community. So, but I will leave it at that, and that hopefully explains to our audience why we will not on this show get involved in this sort of discussion. And we will leave it to you guys in the community to deal with that yourselves. Right, let's move on. And S. Baines has a great comment here. S. Baines says, great editorial, thank you. The caste system was created to provide inequality with a religious veneer. Absolutely right. As we've talked about, it is a deeply evil system that paints itself over with this religious veneer of Hinduism that had political and social consequences. The caste system made revolutions impossible, indeed, because it embeds people into these castes. And it's very evil. And watch many of my podcasts where we have actually gone in depth about the caste system and how it operates and how it works, why it's so successful, because it enslaves everybody within that system at different layers. But everybody has a stake in it, because everybody, unless you're on the absolute bottom layer, if you're a Dalit, but everybody above the Dalits has a stake in the system, because of course they have got people subservient to them, inferior to them, which means I want the system to stay in place because I am superior, even the fact that you've got superiors to you. That is why it has survived so many thousands of years. And S. Baines continues, this system makes revolutions impossible until the Sikh faith challenged it. Yes, that is why the Sikhs, and I often ask this question of my guests, why are Sikhs always so targeted by the Brahmins, those people sitting at the top of this system? Why are the Sikh community so targeted? Because, as you rightly say, S. Baines, they provide the challenge. They are challenging this very system. They are challenging and stand in direct opposition, as you say, to the core tenets of Hindu ideology. And then you say there was no India prior to the creation of it by the British. It took Brahmanical conceit and arrogance to think that India was eternal and should be governed under Brahmin rule and ideology under this very caste system. Absolutely right. They put this system in place. They imposed this caste system. Once the British left, they imposed and they continued this system to ensure that they could retain control as a colonial ruler, succeeding the British. It is a criminal ideology which is laying waste to a criminal enterprise. Beautifully put, S. Baines. I couldn't have put it better myself. And TC responds saying, that's right. That's why Sikhs are not Hindus. Yes. Completely different ideology. Sikhi is religion, not culture. Absolutely right there, James.
Absolutely. And there are cultures within religions, but not to be mistaken to replace one for the other. So absolutely. And it's a religion that is so deeply rooted. And again, going back to the Sikh Empire and long before that. So it's been there, it's been established, and it is not Hinduism.
Indeed. We will keep saying it over and over. Now, this was a curious comment from Rajib Joshi. This almost made Critics Corner, but it sits on the fence on this one. Now, Rajib Joshi says India is 50,000 years old, really. Compare that to other civilizations' system. The most pure equal rights revolution was communism. It could not be realised. Think about it. Yeah, this raises a lot of questions and a lot of potential discussions. Firstly, is India 50,000 years old? India isn't. Now, people might have, or human beings, whatever they were 50,000 years ago, might have lived on the subcontinent. But again, this raises a lot of questions. Does it really? But then you say most pure equal rights revolution was communism. Yeah. Oh, where to begin on this one? Communism, in theory, is a good system. It treats everybody as equal. Ironically, that's what Sikh is. It treats everybody as equal. But communism failed profoundly because those who ruled communist, and there's the irony, those who ruled communist societies realise that people are not equal. That some, well, in the words of George Orwell, there are those who are more equal than others. And communism has failed the world over because it just does not work. Because there are those, human nature means that there is always one person in 10, as a simplistic thing. There's always that 1 in 10 who feels that they are who are genetically programmed to want to control their fellow human beings, who want to take power over their fellow human beings, who want to accumulate all the wealth. That is, they are genetically programmed to do that. Wherever you look across the world, whatever nation you live in, there are always those 1 in 10s who are genetically programmed to need to control others, to take the resources and money from others. That is what they do. And that, unfortunately, is why communism fails, is because those 1 in 10s get together and take control of those communist societies. You look at every communist society on the planet, it is a failed society. History has proven over and over again, communism fails. Unfortunately, yes, in theory, it is an equal rights revolution. In practice, it doesn't work because the failing part there is human beings themselves. They cannot work in that society because they just can't do it. They're genetically programmed to fail communism, sadly. Anyway, we Indians don't need certificates from crumbling experiments. We have a proud, rich history spanning thousands of years. Now, this is where your comment falls apart. India hasn't existed for thousands of years. Human beings have existed on the Indian subcontinent for thousands of years, but that is not India. India has only existed since 1947, and before that as part of the British Empire. It is a colonial boundary. It is a colonial collection of different cultures. India is not that, what I think what you're referring to here. Today, the world looks up to India more than any other power. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I hate to say this. I hate to shatter your illusions here because the jig is up on paper tigers. Now, India, and I will caveat what I'm saying, is India is an incredibly wonderful nation. I love India deeply. I have been there. I love the people. I love its cultures. Its huge diversity of cultures, of people. It's got an incredible cuisine. It's got an incredible history, etc., etc. But that, in reality, is not India. I think the India that you're referring to. India is made up of these different cultures and identities. It is rich in its diversity. India itself, that I think you're referring to here, is an artificial construct of modern times, essentially created by the British and continued by the Brahmins under a continued colonial control. So this is an interesting yet strange comment, James. I don't know if you can make more of this than I can.
No, I'd have to agree with you there, Angus. I really can't add anything more to that than, sometimes people have a difference of opinion because it may have geographically been there, but it was not India.
Yeah, and I think where you say we have a proud, rich history spanning thousands of years, yes, you do. But then I think you're spinning that into something that is wrong. India itself is too modern to include that, I would say. So again, it raises a lot of questions that we could talk about for a long time. But thank you anyway, Rajiv Joshi, for that interesting comment.
Yeah.
And, we continue about the RSS. Human says, RSS was always an outsider ideology. They never belonged to India. They replaced tribes to caste and developed worst inhuman caste system. Yes, you're absolutely right. The Brahmins took control of India. They continued this colonial rule of India from the British by imposing and continuing this dreadful caste system, James. We just cannot, we can't leave it because the whole caste system, which still exists, despite the fact it's technically illegal in India, it still exists. And the RSS are still trying to spread it across the diaspora. We've reported on stories, James, haven't we not? Where the caste system, they're trying to impose the caste system even in the workplace in the United States we talked about. It's everywhere, James, isn't it?
It certainly is, and it's got to be rooted out and ended, but it's a really tough one because it's systemic and it's generational, so it's going to take time.
Indeed. Right, we must rush through now because we're running out of time as always. Hat B says, just like how the BJP glorify Lawrence Bishnoi, who runs gangs, yes, the criminal, but the BJP support and protect him, yet Amritpal Singh is labelled as a terrorist and thrown in Dibrugarh jail, only because he's a Sikh who is vocal about Sikh rights. Same as Jaggi, absolutely right. And I think this just points out very clearly, James, really what the Indian government is all about and what the RSS and the BJP are all about. Yeah, we'll glorify Bishnoi, we'll use him to spread our own agenda, but any legitimate political protester who stands up for actual basic human rights in India gets thrown in jail, James. That is the classic Indian hypocrisy.
Absolutely. And the Bishnoi gang, I mean, their tentacles reach far and wide in different countries, and yet, they are still protecting them.
Indeed, they are. I'll just correct what I said. It's not Indian hypocrisy. It's Indian government hypocrisy. That's a very clear distinction.
That's right.
Mankind Success says producing any documents in India is very easy. It is indeed. Create fake, bogus documents. It is. In this modern world of technology, anybody can create almost any document these days. It's quite scary. They're trying to put spy software in opposition leaders' phones. Yeah, this comes back to what we were talking about Mossad. I think there was a comment earlier, I think in one of last week's show, about Mossad selling this spyware to the Indian government, and they've been using it. Yeah, and I think you're correctly saying they're trying to put spy software in opposition leaders' phones. They're playing a dirty political game. I think politics is dirty in any country, James, but I think they take it to a different level in India.
Absolutely, and we've seen this where spyware or spy software has been put in world leaders' phones in Germany and around the globe, where it's been used by media outlets. So yeah, it's not surprising that the India government is utilizing that technology as well.
Wouldn't be surprised. And of course, the Indian government, the RSS, openly now accuse Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition of the Congress party, of being influenced by foreigners, by foreign governments and foreign money, because they claim because he's using stories provided by the foreign media, etc. So yeah, a dirty game, particularly in India. Right, delighted to say, Critics Corner is back. Thank you to our many critics who have poured in, so it always makes a lively show to report on some critical comments. Subhashish Biswas says, "You wish Bharat is failing like you wish for China and Russia. Reality is we're teaming up. India democracy is built up on the principles of Sri Ram and Guru Nanak." Well, absolutely right, as is your right as a nation. If you want to ally with China and Russia, that is your prerogative, and good luck to you. The problem is that you then say Indian democracy is built on the principles of Sri Ram and Guru Nanak. Well, I'm not sure about Guru Nanak. I'm sure the Sikh community might question that. Particularly when it comes to the BJP and the RSS. But you're using the term Indian democracy in almost the same sentence as you're talking about teaming up with China and Russia. Those great democratic nations? I don't think so. They are totalitarian communist regimes. So I think you might get a bit of a shock if you follow suit with China and Russia, James. I don't think they make very comfortable bedfellows. Democracy with China and Russia.
But they've also got to keep in mind that there's no honor among thieves either, Angus.
Again, it just astonishes me. It's almost the sad naivety of somebody who I totally applaud any Indian nationalism. We all must stand up for our patriotic rights of our country, as you absolutely must do as an Indian. But you must understand what it is you're actually standing up for, is that your government is taking your nation in alliance with totalitarian regimes like Russia and China. It is not a good place to go. If that's what you want, then fine, that is your democratic right. But you must fully understand what it is that you're jumping into bed with. And I don't think, sadly, in your naivety, you understand where your government is taking you. But anyway, that is your right. So thank you for that comment. Now, Bablu, this guy, oh, here we go again. This guy is a vast hypocrite. What about the British royal family? Literally gets paid to do nothing but rule by the English working man. He only wishes to destabilise India because its economy has again overtaken the UK after they looted India for nearly 200 years. Yes, now you're absolutely right in that latter part. We did loot India for nearly 200 years. I personally wasn't there and I didn't do it, so I'm not apologising for it, but I'm sure my forefathers did it because in those times, that is what they did. The powerful went out there and took control of nations because they could. That is what they did in those days. I can't apologise for it. That is what happened in centuries past. And if it wasn't the British, it would have been somebody else. If it wasn't somebody else, it could have been the Indians who did that. I think there was a Mughal empire. There have been all sorts of empires over centuries past who stole the Kohinoor diamond, for example, etc., etc. In other words, look, you can't blame empires from the past, because how far back do you go? The Romans? Do you blame the Romans? Do you blame Kublai Khan, etc., etc.? So again, it's an old argument, and I find it a bit boring because, frankly, you can't blame ancestors for where we are today. We all enjoy the fruits of our ancestors, but again, we can't apologise for it. All I would say is look to the present and look to the future. If you don't like it, change your future. That is in your power. What I would say is address your comment, Bablu, about me being a hypocrite. No, I'm not, because absolutely I call out evil whenever I see it. I regularly criticise the British Empire for what they did. I'll take a prime example. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, I think, was a disgrace, a stain on the British Empire, etc. I call out British evils. We call out what happened in 1984, the potential British support of the Indian government on the attack on the Golden Temple. I think that was disgusting. I'm not a hypocrite. I call out evil wherever it happens, and I regularly criticise the British government, etc., etc. So I don't like to think that I am a hypocrite. And then your comment about the British royal family literally gets paid to do nothing but rule by the English working man. Sadly, you're betraying your ignorance there. The British royal family does not rule Great Britain. By constitution, the British royal family exists by consent of the British people. If we didn't like it, we would remove them. We would remove them democratically. They exist by the British people's consent. They don't rule us. They rubber stamp legislation. Our government rules us. Any laws that our parliament pass has to be signed by the king. He signs it, but he rubber stamps it. I don't think in history, or in recent modern history, our monarch has refused to sign any legislation. They don't control us, they don't rule us. They exist by our consent. So sadly, that is not the case, that they get paid by us to do nothing. They have a constitutional role that sits very comfortably within our democracy. But thank you for our comment. James, I don't know if you've got any comments on that one.
Just that there's an easy way to tell the difference, especially for Canada, because we have now the King's picture going on to all of our money. So he wants his face on it, whereas our rulers and politicians only want their hands on it, Angus.
Indeed. So it's I'm not going to go on that one, Bablu, but thank you for your comment on that. I think you need to understand certainly how the monarchy sits in the West. Clearly, it's not how you think it is. If it was, then I think there would be a revolution. That's why we exist the way we do in our constitution. And then the final comment from the juicer. Why can't you understand? They're using Khalistan to mess you guys up. Learn the games that are being played and have been played. And then you refer to Sikhi Vichar Forum net, knowledge is key. Now, this is a curious comment. I did look up sikhivicharforum.net, and I have to say I don't fully understand what you're saying here. So, and we are open to all points of view on this channel. We try to dig out the truth where we find it. We try to counter the narrative coming out of India, which of course is a very prejudiced narrative that comes out of India. That is not to say that we ourselves, might be influenced by other people. That is why we encourage our audience to correct us if we get things wrong, to correct us or guide us if we are being influenced in the wrong way. And you're implying that we are ourselves being used by using this Khalistan message to mess us up. I don't understand your comment. Please contribute further. Explain why you think that the Khalistan movement is manipulating us. I'm very curious, because everything that I've seen supports everything that we talk about the Khalistan movement, about its peaceful democratic credentials, about what its end goal is, that it's to establish a nation for the Sikh community. Not all Sikhs support it. Totally respect that. That's what happens in a democracy. But I'm very interested, very curious to know, the juicer, why you made this comment. Please explain why you think that, they're using it to mess us up. I think it's a fascinating comment, that, James.
Absolutely. I mean, it goes without saying that if you are going to put a statement like that, we always encourage you to really add to it, because we want to know the substance and we want to know what it is that we are getting wrong. But again, we are reporting the truth about the subjects. We are promoting the freedom of people to vote for Khalistan or vote in the referendums, whether it's yes or no. We just want to see the freedom respected, that people have that democratic choice.
Yeah, it may well just be an advert for sikhivichaforum.net. That might be literally what it is.
And it very well could be.
It could well be. But otherwise, let us know. Please educate us. Tell us why you think this is the case. But thank you for your comment anyway. Right, and on to our final set of comments for the show. Baljinder Bath says, good morning, and a very good morning to you, Baljinder. Thank you for that one. It was just a random, lovely comment, and it was just a good morning back to you, and of course to our audience, and a good afternoon and good evening to wherever you may be around the world. And a big thank you, as always, to every single one of you in our audience for watching, and for those of you who've contributed in the comments. So thank you for that very simple, very nice, very lovely epithet that you put there. Coombs says, hi Angus and James, it's always so exciting when a video is released. I watch those videos when driving to and from work. Now this worried me. I hope you're not driving and watching us. I hope you're driving and listening to us, James.
Exactly. So yeah, they listen, and like my kids, as long as they listen, they may not always hear, but they're there.
And I would say, please watch the road, more importantly than watching us, wherever you may be. But you do say, you add to that saying, please add the option to donate on the YouTube video. There's a way to add a super thanks that lets viewers pay directly. I can't seem to do it. Yes, perhaps YouTube, Indian government, has blocked this feature. Yes, it has. Sadly, the Indian government got to us. We have been demonetized, as have many Sikh channels like us. They've used their own agents in the big tech companies. Of course, they do employ many Indian diasporas, people who obviously work on behalf of the RSS, and they have closed us down monetarily. So, but what I would point you to is in the comments, in the description below, the link tree, and there is a donate button. If you click on the link to our page, our website, there is a donate button there. So please, thank you very much indeed for that comment. I would point our watchers, if you do wish to donate, and all donations are massively appreciated, because it does help us keep going, because of course we're not getting any money now from YouTube, which really has hurt us, I have to say. But if you're willing to donate, it is every donation is massively appreciated, and it does help us keep the channel alive and keep us going. So thank you very much indeed to each and every one of you that has donated in the past, and thank you in anticipation for those who will donate. Just look in the description below, you will find a link. Thank you for that. And our final comment. This is a funny one. Harjeet Rasha says, hello James and Angus. Well, hello to you. You both have a great show and you've always enjoyed it. Thank you. I've noticed one thing, Angus. You look white and a little pale. James looks very red. Does he sometimes drink blood? Just curious, James.
No, I don't drink blood. See, the reality is that Angus is over in Britain. They're known for being pale. I'm in Canada and watching people argue about becoming the 51st state, so I'm red with anger. But in any event, it's actually a lighting issue that we are working on here at the Vancouver studio, so we hope to have the redness gone real soon.
Indeed, and yes, the sun doesn't shine very often here in the UK, and it's winter here, so that's probably why I look white and pale, because it's very cold and miserable here. But in reality, it's actually a technical issue. That it's all about the cameras that we use. James and I are in different parts of the world using different equipment, and of course, each of our cameras has a different color setting, and we're not a big high budget studio where they can use expensive equipment and coloured, using raw footage that they can colour retrospectively with a big team of editors, etc. We don't have that. We've got a very, very small team. We edit things very quickly to produce it, get it online, and that's basically why inconsistencies appear like that. We just unfortunately don't have the big budgets that the bigger channels do to make it all look like we're the same colour. So that is unfortunately the technical reason behind that. I hope that explains it to you. So there you have it, beginning of another week for Perspectives, but unfortunately James and I must bring things to a close there for another day. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in, always give us loads of really interesting information to check out, so do keep them coming in. Thank you for all those comments as always. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellotv.com on any news items you'd like to highlight that you think we might have missed. But in the meantime, that is the end of another show. Thank you so much for watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me and it's a goodbye from James.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.